It's on.
All right, we're ready to go. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Las Vegas. Welcome to reInvent. My name is Jesse Gebhardt. I am the leader for our QuickSight Solution Architecture team worldwide. I'll be joined by a couple of our great customers, Michael Pravat and Steve Bailey. I'll have them introduce themselves in just a moment here. Cool seeing everybody with the headphones on. I feel like I'm kind of at a silent disco. Also, hi to everybody who's simulcasting from the various locations around the venues. And thank you again for joining us for our session today, where we're going to be talking about how generative AI can help us reimagine the capabilities of business intelligence. All right, to just start off with a framework for our discussion today, first I'll be walking us through a little bit of a brief history around business intelligence capabilities, as well as the opportunity for what generative AI can do to help all users get more insights out of their data. Then we're going to be walking through specifically the Q capabilities that we have in QuickSight, including a demo. Then I'm going to pass it over to Michael from Availity and Steve from Anthology to walk through their journeys that they've had using Q and QuickSight, both for their internally in their organizations, as well as embedded into their customer-facing products. And then we're going to wrap up with some resources in terms of what to do next, how do we get trials, some learning materials, as well as outline some other great opportunities for learning throughout the week that are focused on Amazon Q and QuickSight. Q&A, I think with the silent session we made, rather than passing mics around, I think if you just come find us afterwards, we'll stick around and we're happy to answer your questions as well. All right, without further ado, let's jump in. So I mentioned my name is Jesse. I lead the QuickSight Solution Architecture team. Gentlemen, would you like to do a quick intro? Come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Pravat. I'm the Chief Architect and Chief Data Officer for Availity. I love engineering. I love data. Perfect match. I'm going to talk to you today about how we use QuickSight and Q to enable self-service.
Hi everybody, I'm Steve Bailey, Director of Product Management for Data and Analytics at Anthology. I've been working with data, and particularly in the learning space, in the last 10 years, and so I'm going to be talking to you about how Anthology has been using QuickSight and more recently Amazon Q in QuickSight to deliver insights to our customers.
Thank you so much, guys. All right, so at a very high level, Amazon QuickSight, we talk about it as a unified BI service. So what do we mean by that? Typically organizations, they might have multiple tools that solve for dashboarding and visualization. They might have a different tool set for doing like pixel perfect and operational type reporting, which is more kind of static and distributed. Maybe a whole different set of technologies, maybe even custom technologies that they've used to put analytics into their own applications. Maybe something else even for natural language query. But with QuickSight, we've unified all of these into a single service. It is a serverless architecture. So the idea with that is that you can get consistent performance no matter how many users you throw at it, how much data you throw at it, how many dashboards you have, the concurrency times that you have there. That's our job at AWS to make sure that you get consistent performance no matter what you throw at it. We offer very flexible pricing models for different types of use cases. Like if you're using it internally, we offer a per user model. If you're using it in your own application, we have more of like a usage-based type of model that works if you're trying to monetize these capabilities in your own products. But at the end of the day, generally a lower total cost of ownership than other tools you might be using. And then lastly, we integrate very tightly with the AWS security frameworks. Or if you're embedding us into one of your applications and you've got separate authentication, authorization rules that you manage there, we can integrate with these as well, but generally very tight integration with security both in AWS and your applications. So we have over 100,000 customers that are using QuickSight today. These come across all different industries, customers of different sizes, really from every corner of the globe as well. Really, I think just a testament to the amount of innovation that we've done in QuickSight, the amount of investment that we're putting in it. Since I think today is actually the 8th year, we launched QuickSight 8 reInvents ago. So this is our 8th anniversary for QuickSight. And hope that you become one of these customers as well. All right, let's do a little bit of a history of BI capabilities. So we're going to rewind the clock. Let's go to like kind of the 80s into the 90s and maybe kind of going up into the early 2000s. You know, BI was typically static, tabular type of reporting that a very small group of highly skilled developers would code these reports up and then distribute them out to a relatively small set of folks like operations leads, maybe other senior leaders in the company, but certainly not to the entire organization. And then in kind of the late 2000s was the dawn of interactive drag and drop dashboarding. So this kind of passed that power on from highly skilled developers onto your business analyst, to your data analyst type of persona. Just made it so that so many more people could actually build their own dashboards and ask questions out of data. And in turn, they were able to share that with a much larger community of people who were looking to get insights out of that same data. So that kind of brings us up to like almost where we're at today. And I'm going to paint what the future looks like for this as well, but we'll come back to this slide a little bit later. So did dashboards solve the problem? I think that's one of the questions here. Maybe an analogy here was maybe you just bought a new car. You just drove it off the lot. As soon as you drive it off the lot, it lost value immediately. That technology is then outdated a bit. And I can expect that probably a majority of you have probably built a dashboard at some point in your careers. Once you share that dashboard out, what's the first thing that happens? Usually someone asks, can I add a different data source into it? Can you make me a different slice of it? Can you go add a couple more filters? Can you add these extra visuals? So after we build that dashboard, we revisit it, we revise it, we reiterate it, and it's kind of this cycle. But in reality, what that often ends up with is a proliferation of dashboards. I now have 10 dashboards that look very similar. They maybe answer slightly different questions from the original one, but I now have 10 different sources of the truth, all just to help people answer like that next follow-up question. So generative AI is here. If you haven't heard, I'm sure you're going to hear about it a lot this week if you haven't heard about it over the last couple of years. But it is very good at a specific set of things. For instance, it helps us access the broad world knowledge of basically anything on the public internet, right? It's a great learning and teaching assistant, whether that's you're trying to troubleshoot a piece of code that you're working on, you're trying to learn about a new subject matter, maybe you're trying to summarize some information, a very dense document that was sent to you, or a series of emails you're trying to summarize, right? It's very good with this textual type of information and around a specific set of tasks. Now, on the other hand, BI is good for a very different set of tasks. It was designed to answer very precise questions. It is great at taking data from its raw format, automating that into a consumable format where we can get insights out of it and then delivering out to others, kind of automating that whole process. It's good for being able to verify the truth of where a number came from. I'm always able to trace something back to, okay, this visual came from this data source, here's the query that ran it, here's the source system, right? I can always verify that entire pipeline. But when we combine these two things, we get the best of both worlds. So we've coined this generative BI. And next I'm going to walk you through how we've applied this to the Amazon Q capabilities in QuickSight. So a high-level overview of what Q looks like in QuickSight today. Three kind of major sets of capabilities. The first set is around empowering authors, what we call authors, but what you might be calling just an analyst, a data worker, to build dashboards and find those insights for others much more proficiently. The second two sets of categories we have here are more for the end users, for the general consumer. In the QuickSight world, we call these folks readers. So one of these is around, say someone just shared a new dashboard with you. This happens to me all the time. I'm trying to explore this. I'm trying to figure out what are the key insights before I start to drill in and really get the hang of it. I might just want to ask it for an executive summary and kind of guide me towards where the key data points are in this dashboard. I then might have follow-up questions, and that's what the Q&A aspects are there for. And then the last set of capabilities is called storytelling. So once I find something interesting in the data, it usually doesn't end there. I have to go convince somebody else to take some action on it usually. And I'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. We'll just leave it at that for now. Just quick note, if you may have heard of Amazon Q Business, when you have a pro license of Q Business or a pro license in QuickSight, you're entitled to licenses of the other. So they're basically the same license. So once you get a pro license, you can use capabilities across both services. All right, so now to double click a little bit on these capabilities. Back to that first one, which is the authoring experience. So 3 things that I can do. I can build visuals by just describing what I want to show on the screen. I can also build calculations to build new formulas and calculate new metrics in the data. And then what we see here is I can also refine those visuals. I can change chart types, I can add more fields, I can apply new formatting to them, but all of these just using simple prompts. So here, walking through an example of a calculation. I'll show you a couple more of these in the demo as well. So shifting back to the reader persona, we talk about performing Q&A on data. So the way I want you to think about Q&A is an extension of the dashboards that you have today. With every dashboard you build, there is no way that we could predict every single question that someone's going to ask. And even if we could predict every question, there's no way we could build every single filter, every single visual to answer every question that they might have ahead of time, right? It's just going to become way too dense, way too complicated. So we build dashboards that are going to answer 80% of the questions that are predictable, and then Q&A is meant to augment that experience by helping answer those follow-up questions that are very specific to the situation and to the user themselves. So what you see on the screen here are some examples of answering both very vague questions like best performing products, where you didn't even mention how you want to measure it, as well as like very specific questions. If I want to see exactly this metric for these 2 values compared for this one particular period. So it's good at answering both vague and specific types of questions. And then on the storytelling side, I mentioned, this is where you're trying to communicate these insights to someone else in order to drive some decision making. So think about, you're walking into a client meeting next week. You're walking into a meeting with your leadership. And you need to come with some data-driven argument of why you should be taking a decision in a certain direction. So typically what we do today is we take screenshots of things, we throw them into a PowerPoint, we throw them into a document, and we bring that into the meeting, right? But when we do that, we lose all the governance. That is now a file that could be shared to anybody, and we lose all security on it. We also lose the ability to update that very easily. So with storytelling, what we aim to do is kind of optimize that whole process so that we can have this shareable asset that is interactive, but also has the same security on it that you do on your dashboards. Can be very easily updated, but it has information from insights from the insights from the visuals that you have in your dashboard, combined with that broad world knowledge from the LLMs. And lastly, just wanted to highlight that you can embed these into your own applications. On the screenshot you see on the screen here, this is actually from the Illuminate product from Anthology, which Steve's going to walk us through a little bit later on, so a bit of a tease here. But specifically that Q&A experience, along with dashboards and individual visuals and other types of things as well, you can embed these into either your own internal enterprise applications, or if you're building your own products that are customer facing, you can embed these into those as well and kind of monetize these capabilities. All right, so we're going to bring it back to the slide we were looking at before. That kind of brought us up to at least close to current state, maybe a year or 2 ago. Now, with Generative BI, we truly believe that the ability to gain insights out of data, to ask questions of it, to interrogate that data, is accessible to literally anybody that can type a question in. All right, so let's take a look at some of these capabilities in action. To set this up a little bit, the data that we have here is from the Formula One racing series. If you're not aware, there was a Formula One race here in Las Vegas just 2 weekends ago. In this data, we have data for every single driver for every race, their starting position, their ending position at the end of the race, how many points they got for their final position. Basically every race, every driver's position for the 22 rounds that have occurred this year. So there's 2 more rounds for the rest of the year, but we're almost through the season. So we have a pretty complete data set here. So we'll kick this off. So consider yourself a new user of QuickSight. You're trying to explore this data for the first time, trying to get some information on the screen and see what we have in here. So first I'm going to ask Q to build a visual that shows me the top drivers for the whole year. And it's going to pick an appropriate visualization type, and I can choose to add that to my analysis. You'll see it's also giving me some suggestions. Well, did you mean this? Did you mean something else? In this next example, I'm going to ask for something very specific. I'm going to say, give me all the details of every single race, all the drivers, where did they finish. I'm even going to apply some filters. I'm going to say, actually only give me drivers that finished in positions 1, 2, or 3, and it'll build that out for me. Yeah, maybe I forgot some fields. I can refine these, and I can add a couple of additional fields like the date of the race and the round number. I can make finer tuned adjustments to this as well. So for instance, doing conditional formatting. I want you to color code people that finish first gold, 2 silver, 3 bronze. So I can apply things like conditional formatting. I'm just going to fix the sort order on this so it goes 1, 2, 3 for each one of them, a little compound sort. But the next thing we might want to do is see like the cumulative total of, because they rack up points for every single race across the season. I want to see where they're at current day. So here we're just going to, again, describe the type of computation we want to create, and Q is going to write that whole syntax out for me. It's not like this is the most complex calculation in the world, but if you're a new user, just like any new tool, there's maybe some slightly specific syntax for QuickSight. Rather than going and like scouring the help and our community for that information, I can just describe what I'm looking for. And then we're going to use that calculation in one final visual here, where I'm going to ask and say, show me the cumulative points across each of the rounds and break it down for each one of our drivers. And we'll get that a little bit bigger on the screen here. Well, let me get a quick pause. There we go. Okay. Let's go back a couple seconds. So at the top of the leaderboard right now is Max Verstappen. He won the championship last year. So we can see his cumulative points, and he's actually extended his lead after maybe the 4th or 5th round there. And let's dive a little bit further into this data. So that was kind of wrapping up the authoring capabilities, again, for analysts to help them build dashboards, build their visuals, their calculations, and everything much, much quicker. All right, so we're going to fast forward a little bit. After just a little bit more effort, a little more formatting, we've got a nicely polished dashboard here. So let me pause this where we're at. All right, so we saw the top finishers. So the first sheet here is a double click on specifically the Las Vegas race. And then I have another sheet I'm going to show you, which is the cumulative year-to-date standings. In this middle visual you see on the screen, this is referred to as a bump chart. It's great for looking at like the rankings of anything over time. So what you see on the left is the starting grid position for that particular driver, and on the right is where they ended up at the end of the race. So you can see that George Russell finished and started at first and finished in first, whereas Lewis Hamilton, he started in 10th place and he finished second. So you can kind of see his line traversed up. That middle section there was kind of like a spaghetti mess. That's the first set of pit stops, which is a very crucial part of the race because everybody's coming in to get new tires and whatnot. And it's a great opportunity for them to pass to their drivers. So you see a lot of kind of mix-up coming out of that. So going a little bit further on here, these last couple of visuals on the bottom, they represent each individual lap time for every racer. It went through really quickly on the top, but Lando Norris had the fastest lap of the entire race. It was actually his last lap, number 50. And that visual on the right is showing the total positions gained or lost by that driver during the race. And that last visual was actually using a new capability we launched just last week, where you can build now custom visualizations in QuickSight, using many things from the high charts core library. So, and then actually we see some examples here on the top right, that radial bar chart. That's another example of some of the custom visuals that we made for this. So on the second sheet, we have the full cumulative 2024 standings. So we can see 1, 2, 3, Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc. From a driver perspective, we also have, so there's kind of teams in F1. So there's 10 different teams. They're called constructors. And then each team has 2 drivers in every race. So there's always 20 drivers and 10 teams. And they have championships for both of them, both for the individuals and for the team. So we're seeing the cumulative points for each of those championships. And we've got some interesting insights out of this, but I might have some further questions. So actually in this data, I have the full history of F1 data, not just 2024. I have this all the way back to like 1950. So what we're first going to start asking, show me the top drivers all time. I know it's probably small for you on the screen, I apologize for that, but some familiar names up there. The top row says Lewis Hamilton. If you saw, he came in second in the last race. He's been racing probably the last 17 years or so. So he has the most points all time of all racers. Max Verstappen, who is, I think, already locked up this year and locked up last year as well. He's number 3 all time. And just, along those same lines of, we want to extend the dashboard, extend the usability of it, and be able to ask questions that aren't specifically referring always to data that's in that dashboard. So we ask some historical data. Now we're going to ask something like, how many wins does Max have this season? I get natural language summaries. So you will always get like that top left visual is what we think the answer to your original question is, but we'll give you kind of a wider picture of other slices of that data to give you further context. Like for instance, here's the average finish position for Max, but I could see that trended over time, or if I wanted to see the exact details for each race. And it'll pull out certain insights, like this was up a certain amount of percentage or down a certain amount of percentage. So it'll try and give you, again, a full picture and give you more context so you can come to the most educated conclusion around that. So last question here is, what percentage of the races did Max finish in the top 3? So almost 60%, but you get to see last year it was well over 90% that he finished in the top 3. All right, so it's a bit of the Q&A. Last thing here, we'll talk about the data stories. So again, data stories, I'm trying to go communicate this to some others. So the way I build a story is I give it a prompt. I'm going to ask, can you just give me a summarization of the top performances by drivers and the constructors? I'm going to go select some visuals you have from the dashboard. You can pick visuals from any dashboard that you have access to. And you can see within seconds, it is filled out like a fully structured, formulated document, complete with insights and data from the dashboards themselves, bringing together some of that broad world knowledge from the LLMs too. Now these are completely editable as well. Whether you want to edit the text manually, maybe you have some additional context that may be not in the data, or you just want to manually resize some items there, you can insert additional images and more visuals. So highly editable, but at the end of that, if this is a shareable asset, then you can go send a link to somebody and still have the same security that you had on things like your dashboards. All right, so that concludes my demo. At this point, I would like to hand it off to Mr. Michael Privat to talk to us about his journey with Availity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks. All right. I love the blue ears, by the way. So I'm going to talk to you today about how Availity uses QuickSight to make day-to-day decisions. I'll put this in context, but I'm going to actually focus very much on how we use Amazon Q for self-service. Why? Because if you are on a data team, then you know that all the business people are constantly opening requests for this or that report, this or that analysis, and it doesn't scale, and you'd rather them self-serve. I don't know why I chose you guys as the business people, but if you're not on the data team, you know that you're constantly opening requests and you're opening Jira tickets and requests, and it takes a day or two or whatever to get your reports back, and frankly, you'd rather self-serve. So I'm going to go into this. First, you're probably wondering what Availity even is. If you were not wondering, now you are, because I just said that. So let me help. In the US healthcare system, there are tens of thousands of health insurance plans you can choose from as a patient. Doctors, hospitals have to communicate with these health plans. The problem is, while they all speak more or less the same language, there are variations, there are different dialects. And if you know anything about computers, then you know that for two computers to talk to each other, it has to be pretty exact. So this is where Availity comes in. We know all the dialects, all the variations. We know how to connect every hospital with every health plan. The bottom line is this. If you go to the doctor in the US, your chances are extremely high that your doctor will be talking to your insurance through us. And when I say extremely high, I'm talking 80, 90% chance. So it's very high. So in a way, Availity is sort of like, think of us as the air traffic controller, if you will, making sure that all of this is operating smoothly, all these communications are happening in real time for the benefit of the patient. Now let me illustrate that. Why is the patient even involved here? Well, if you go to the doctor, the very first thing that happens, they check your copay. They want to know how much they should charge you that your insurance isn't covering. And they do that by talking to your insurance through us. Another example that can speak even more loudly is, let's say you find out you need surgery. Before your doctor can even schedule the surgery, they have to check with your insurance to make sure that you're even eligible to get that surgery done. And they do that by talking through us. Again, we're the air traffic controller. Think of it this way. We facilitate billions and billions of interactions every year. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you backstage with me. This is going to be your first day as an Availity analyst. And I'm going to show you sort of what we deal with and how we think about this network. So, imagine this is your first day. You come in, you turn on the computer, you see all these links blinking left and right. This is all hospitals and doctors and administrators, government, insurance plan. They're all talking to each other. Your job is to make sure it all operates smoothly, that you prevent overloads, avoid failures, find reroutes whenever needed, prevent fraud, protect the data. Think of it, tens of thousands of systems all talking together, all at the same time, right? And by the way, this is healthcare. It has got to work. It can't fail. It's got to work. The patients are waiting for it, right? I see a couple of stressed out people. I'm going to back off, guys. Don't worry. Availity's got this. We've been doing this for like 20 years. We're really good at this, right? But it doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't happen by itself. We have to constantly have people, analysts like you, welcome to the team, by the way, constantly watch this network, constantly optimize the network, and this is why we need a great BI tool. So I'm going to show you first, day one, what kind of problems you have. Like I said earlier, you're constantly having to open tickets to the data team. Hey, I need to know what's going on up there in that network between maybe that hospital and that insurance plan. Something's not working right. Let's get a report. You open a ticket, Jira, wait a couple of days. It's not that the data team is slow. They just have everyone converging on them all the time, right? The other problem that we often have is it's tough to see through all this data. We facilitate billions of interactions all the time. It's hard to see the narrative behind all these data points. Each of these interactions are creating data points, new data points, and it winds up being trillions and trillions of data points. And so what you wind up having to do is open a ticket for the data team, get a data analyst or even a data scientist to sort of extract the story behind the data. So you open ticket, and we wait. If I bring back my metaphor of air traffic controller, think about it this way. Like if you were an actual air traffic controller, you're sitting up there in the tower and the plane's coming in, like this is the flight from New York requesting permission to land. Hi, hold up, opening a Jira ticket to get a report on the status of the runway. It would not work. I think they talk like that. I'm not sure. I just made it up. Okay. It wouldn't work, and this is why we have to enable self-service. So how did we do this? Well, remember this is a reInvent talk, so I'm going to talk about QuickSight at some point. Jesse, I gotcha. But first, I wanted to share with you what I think are 4 critical components of a good BI stack. Okay, so show of hand, who can think of 4 words that describe? Okay, somebody's following. The font's big enough. That's good. Yes, simple. Because if it's not simple, you're not going to want to use it. You got other things to do. If it's not intuitive, you're not going to know how to use it. Again, you got other things to do. If it's not expressive, you're not going to know what it's actually telling you. And if it's not actionable, then, well, what's the point? Like literally the whole point of a BI stack is to create actionable insights, right? So that's what it takes to have a great tool. Excellent. Now remember I talked to you about self-service. A great tool is not enough. If I give you a tool and a blank sheet and I go, you got this, off you go, it doesn't work. And the problem isn't the tool, the problem is the blank sheet. And so my strategy to enable self-service is to bring data points to the customers or to the users, and have them, so I call those jumping off points, and have them self-serve from there. Right? So it's a lot easier if you don't start from a blank sheet. So one way, wow, that was wild. I should not have looked at it. So one way that we bring a jumping off point to the users is obviously through dashboards. So we made up this completely fake data set, and we added this little blip over there in October, so that as a stakeholder, you immediately go and think, hey, wait a minute, what's going on over there in October? And that is your jumping off point. Then you go into queue for QuickSight, and then you start asking your follow-up questions. So, Q for QuickSight is completely aware of the context. It knows what dashboard you were just looking at. So when you ask it your question in plain English, hey, what's going on month to month with that data? And you can see that it's not a teenager. It doesn't answer with yes or no or meh. It just gives you a full report. And that becomes your next jumping off point, right? And so off you go, you're self-serving. This is wonderful. Another way that we allow users to self-serve is through a digital newspaper that we produce internally that we call the Availity data story. And the idea of the Availity data story is to create articles, write articles, think of it as a bunch of blogs that describe what has been going on at Availity from a data perspective. And so we throw in charts and a couple of things in there. And the idea is the same. Jumping off point, we just put a story in front of you. It elicits ideas, and then you go on and self-serve. So I'm going to talk to you here about how we generate the data story articles. And it turns out QuickSight has a feature called data story, so that's a happy coincidence. And you prompt it just like any other chatbot. You just sort of describe what you want. Hey, I'm writing about this one thing that I'm noticing. And you can do some prompt engineering too. As you use it, you get smarter and smarter. And for example, you can tell it, hey, this is the general structure that I want to see. So for example, tell me about what you're seeing in this data. Maybe tell me your thoughts about what you're seeing about this data. And then lastly, write me some next steps. So you prompt it. You add a visual, one or more. I think you can add 20 or something like this. The visuals are the basis, the data set that you wanted to actually write about. So I selected that same chart. And you can see that within seconds, you've got a full write-up. Now, QuickSight isn't a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's pretty dry. It has no sense of humor. It literally just writes what it sees and what it thinks. But actually, there are some pretty smart, nuggets of thoughts in there. And so our process is to generate this, and then I have an editorial team that goes through it and just makes it a lot more digestible, so that you, as a first-time new recruit, you come in, you can read the data story and be ready to get going. So if you think about this, if I recap, on day one, actually you showed up, we gave you the data story, you read, awesome, you started understanding. From there, we added links to the dashboard so you can jump and ask your follow-up questions, and you could start doing your job immediately. On day two, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. You got this. You jump straight to the dashboards, and then you Q&A, and then you advance, etc. On day three, because you're a pretty ambitious analyst, you want your own dashboard. And so this is a repeat of what Jesse showed you earlier. It turns out QuickSight has a feature for building dashboards just by describing what you want. So this is pretty nice. Hey, I want a table that aggregates the counts of transactions by day, by user. And so it generates a table, looks good. Yes, add that to my dashboard. Right? So I'm building a dashboard. I'm not even coding. And then you go tinker with it. Yeah, it looks good, but you know what? Instead of aggregating by day, I want to aggregate by month. It's a lot more representative of the business. And so you simply tell it. The whole point here is you just keep tinkering with your visuals until you get what you want. Maybe having a data table isn't really the greatest thing. Maybe I like pretty pictures. So you can literally change the table into a chart simply by describing that. And the bottom line is, in just about under a minute or two, I was able to build a full dashboard. So obviously it's a dashboard, you can add more widgets, but in under a minute or two, I can create a dashboard without coding anything, without really knowing much about the data. You can see the data dictionaries on the left there. And now I have my dashboard. This is the dashboard I'm going to use every day. And then maybe on day 4, where I'm feeling super awesome, I'm going to steal someone else's dashboard and improve on it and make it mine. So these are all the options that you've got. So in summary, as we go back to dark mode, since we've released this, about 100 or so users have been able to self-service. So we've released about a little more over a half dozen starter dashboards, right? Your jumping off points, and that is, and we focus the dashboards on various parts of the business. So you've got the sales team that has their dashboards, you've got the network operations team that has their dashboards, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, you as a new recruit, you came in. It took about 15 minutes for you to go from 0 to hero and be able to just operate the system. Ultimately, that means you don't have to open tickets, so you can solve your own questions within seconds instead of waiting for multiple days. Ultimately, this leads to a better experience for the healthcare providers, for the insurers, but obviously also for the patient. So I'm going to leave you with this last thought. Next time you go to the doctor, you're not feeling good, you're feeling sluggish, maybe even a little cranky, you just want everything to go smoothly. You want to see the doctor, get your medicine, go home, feel better. Once you're home, you're back on your feet, you're feeling jolly again. Have a thought for Availity and all the work that we do to make sure that you get the best patient experience you can ever get. On this note, I'll pass it on to Steve.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to now talk to you about how Anthology uses QuickSight and Amazon Q to support a concept that we call the power of together, and to deliver insights to all of our customer base. So just a little bit to start with to explain what Anthology is. So we are an educational technology company. We're the product of multiple mergers that essentially mean that we have a very broad set of EdTech solutions that support a number of different elements of the business of education. Okay. Now in terms of our sort of geographical distribution, the number of clients that we support, obviously it's very broad because of those mergers and because of our client base. But really what we're all about is making learners and educational institutions more successful. That's really what we're here to do. And so one of the ways that we do that is using data. So Anthology has a data and analytics platform called Illuminate. And what we do is we take data from across our various different EdTech solutions, combine it together to provide insight that essentially mean that the more Anthology solutions you have, the more value that you get. Essentially, it's greater than the sum of its parts. Now, just to explain a little bit to start with of what these solutions are, we have 3 key flagship solutions. One is Blackboard, it's our learner management system. One is Student, our student information system, and one is Reach, which is our CRM. And what we're doing, we obviously have a number of other solutions available as well. But essentially, the key initial focus of this platform, of the Illuminate platform, is to combine the data from across those 3 flagship solutions and to surface that data across products. So just to explain a little bit about where we've come from and where we're going with QuickSight, just to really set the scene here. We started a few years ago just bringing data in primarily from our LMS, from Blackboard. And initially, we were just providing access to the data model for the LMS data using SQL, allowing our clients to bring their own BI tool. And of course, a number of clients were very successful in doing that. But unfortunately, that really just puts the problem in the client's hands. They've got all of those issues that Michael was just talking about. Essentially, they've got to ask if I've got a question about what to do with a certain piece of data. I've got to go and ask somebody, wait for them to come back to me, etc. And as well as that, Anthology also, because of the fact that we've been working in this space for so long, we are the actual experts of EdTech, of the LMS. And so we are actually best placed to build that content, that reporting content and those insights for our clients. So we always knew that we would need to create some pre-built reports for our clients. Now we started with some manually created visuals, but we realized very quickly that that wouldn't scale. You know, having to manually code every visualization and then maintain that, obviously that's really going to slow you down, particularly when you've got a large number of reports that you need to build. So we did some shopping around and we very quickly settled on QuickSight for a number of reasons, but primarily, first of all, our existing relationship with AWS. So it wasn't something that we had to start up a completely new relationship with a new vendor. Another one, and this one is really important to be honest, is the pay-as-you-go nature of QuickSight. You know, there is no huge initial cost to get started with it. You can start very, very small and build from there, which from where we were starting was very, very useful. But really, most importantly for us, it was the ability to embed, to essentially white label the use of this BI tool, embed it within our user experience, within our products, so that it was something that appears as an Anthology solution and, you know, and has the user experience to match that. It also enabled us to have a transition period where we could have the QuickSight built reports alongside those more manually built reports and not have to throw those away and start from scratch. Obviously, by now we have replaced all of those basic ones. So where we are now is we've got 20 dashboards across 3 reporting areas of learning, teaching and leading, serving hundreds of clients worldwide. And we're also using the row-level security capability within QuickSight to make it more easy for our clients to compartmentalize their reporting, which then allows them to distribute those reports more broadly within their organizations. Now, another thing that QuickSight also offers is an embedded authoring capability as well. And so although that's not something that we use for our own reports that we build for our clients, it made it something that was a very sensible next move for us to make, was to actually provide this capability to our clients. So, you know, one of the things we were talking about before was, okay, I create this dashboard, which I think is the gold standard. Everybody will love this. Nobody will want any changes to happen. And then instantly you have hundreds of people asking, can we just change this? And so by giving our clients the ability to create their own dashboards and to customize, etc., it then means that they can make it their own. They can apply their own institutional context to the data. Now, because of the fact that this is something that we can't really afford to give away to all of our clients, we did decide to take a freemium approach to this, providing our clients with the read-only dashboards and a certain set of seat licenses for view-only access, but then with a premium upgrade being available for the authoring seats and also additional reader seats as well. And also what we're also doing here as well is to make this more than just yet another BI tool, because of course a lot of our clients already have existing BI tools. What we're doing here is actually providing some scaffolding, providing some additional resources to them that make it easier for them to actually build dashboards within our solution than outside of it. So for example, pre-built data sets that they can reuse. Of course, the ability to reuse the row-level security data set that we use on our standard reports as well. So we started with Blackboard. We've more recently started to get in data from our SIS and our CRM solution. And it's worth mentioning that we actually load this into what we call our canonical data model. And so that is something that's optimized for reporting and nominally product agnostic, which means that conceptually we can bring in data from non-Anthology solutions. In practice, we've only really just started to do that, but for example, we can bring in non-Anthology SIS data for clients who don't have our SIS but do have our LMS, for example. And because we've got that standardized data model, it means that that data flows into all of the structures, all of the reports that actually require that SIS data as well. So just to give an example of the power of combining the data across these 3 domains, I just wanted to sort of illustrate some examples of the type of data that's available. So from our CRM, that's really all about the student intervention. That's where your advisor will intervene when they find a student who is at risk. And of course, all the metrics about that intervention, the timing of it, the method of it, etc., are all stored in there. From the LMS, that really helps you to identify which students you'd actually need to intervene with and the context that you might need to speak to them about. So for example, using those leading indicators to understand whether or not there are any particular issues when it comes to their engagement or their performance. And from the student information system, that's really where all of your demographics reside, as well as the final outcome. So was the student retained? Did they pass the course? Did they progress? Did they graduate, etc.? And so combining all of that together gives you a very, very powerful data set that you can then use for analysis. And so one of the things that we're doing again with that embedded experience and crossing the product boundaries is to take the data about the students' engagement and performance within our LMS and present it to advisors who don't belong in our LMS, present it to advisors who are using our CRM instead. And so what we're doing here is embedding a QuickSight dashboard within our CRM solution so that the advisors can not only see which students might need intervention, but also that broader context around how they're doing more generally within the LMS, historically, currently, etc. We're also adding in derived data points using machine learning into these dashboards as well. But of course, more recently, and a bit more relevant to this conversation, we've started to use Amazon Q in QuickSight as well. Now, this is something that we started to use a little while ago, originally when it was QuickSight Q. And we really saw the potential of conversational data exploration. So this is something that we started to include on our premium layer about a year ago, but this summer we actually made this available to all of our clients. So all of our clients have access to the data Q&A capability. So just to show you a little bit of what that looks like, again, this is in our embedded experience here, but it's the full Amazon Q in QuickSight experience. So we have a topic in here, so student activity, engagement and performance. And the end user can start to explore the data, start to ask questions, and so as you can see here, they're really just asking initially very broadly about student engagement. And of course, what Q is doing is providing a number of different visuals that help them to explore that in different ways. And then from there, the user is then prompted, that's another sort of jumping point, to think about, okay, well, what else might I want to look at in here? One of the things that I think is most important in this particular workflow is that visual in the top left corner, which is just going to appear any second now. There we go. And that is where it's taking the results of those different visualizations and it's summarizing them in plain language. Now that's really important because if I've got a user who is typing in a question in plain language, then realistically the best possible outcome for them is an answer in plain language. And yes, of course, having those visualizations that help them to, number one, validate that what they're seeing is correct, but also to give them the ability and that jumping point to explore the data even further is, for me, the ideal mix. You know, that is really the ideal user experience that you want to have for this type of conversational data exploration at this point. Okay, maybe in the future we won't need to have quite so much visual, we can go straight into the Q&A, but I do think that it's really helpful to have these visualizations as well. Okay, so where we're going next with this is really doing more with the generative BI capabilities. Obviously, we are slightly hand-tied at the moment because of the fact that we use a pretty much exclusively embedded interface, and some of this functionality isn't yet available for embedded clients. But as soon as it becomes available, I'm looking forward to making this available to our authors. So, for example, yes, obviously the data stories, I think that they are going to be very, very useful in an educational context where there are always a lot of reports around end of term, periodic program review, various different things like that that could really benefit from that narrative structure. But as well as that, I think giving our clients the ability to create their own custom Q&A topics that are for their own institutional context is going to be really helpful as well. And so we're very much looking forward to that. So just to finish up here, I did want to mention that we did a recorded webinar with AWS recently around our use of QuickSight and in particular drilling into some of our machine learning models, or one in particular, and how we use QuickSight to deliver that to our clients. And so if you're interested in finding out more, then do feel free to scan the QR code there as well. Okay, I'm going to hand it back to Jesse now to finish up, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much, Michael, as well. All right, to kind of summarize and wrap up here of what we've seen today, in terms of capabilities, we saw how business analysts, how business data analysts can use generative AI with Amazon Q and QuickSight to be more proficient in building dashboards and calculations, making changes to those. We saw how the general end users, those data consumers, can ask questions against data, how can build executive summaries, and how they can tell stories with data to help convince others to take some action, and how we can embed some of these experiences into your own applications. Now moving on to a little bit of getting started. First is that there is a free trial for anybody who does not use QuickSight. If you would stand up a new QuickSight account, you get 30 days. Oh, these darn auto-advancing slides. 4 users of any type. So that means that you can use all of the Q capabilities in these trials as well. So everything you saw today, you'd be able to use in this free trial. These next 2 QR codes, one goes to the Amazon Q and QuickSight website, where you get a bunch more details there. The second is for our community. The community is the best one-stop shop for anything learning related for QuickSight. All of our product demo videos, all of our blogs, all of our recorded webinars. You've got curated learning paths for different types of personas. We've got Q&A forums there with a very vibrant community of people asking and answering questions there. So if you take any link from today, I recommend that QuickSight community link. This is a look at the rest of our business intelligence track for the remainder of the week. I've highlighted a couple of sessions here in pink that are specifically focused on Q and QuickSight. Oh, yes, sorry. So these are focused on Q and QuickSight. You see there's a couple placeholder slides out there on Thursday. I'll go back again. Whatever we saw today, these are the current capabilities of Q and QuickSight. Pay attention during the keynotes this week. We have some very exciting new information that's going to be coming out. Those placeholders that you see there on Thursday will be a double click into some of the things you hear this week. But this What's New session here on Wednesday will take care of any of the new launches that you hear this week, anything that we launched this year. I highly recommend that one. And then lastly, if you want to get hands-on with this and actually try these Q capabilities, we have a workshop on Wednesday that we're also repeating on Thursday. That's what these next slides are some more details and the code specifically for the Wednesday afternoon hands-on workshop, as well as the Thursday hands-on workshop. So these will be 2-hour workshops. You get kind of a playground AWS account. We give you all the assets. We give you a bunch of steps to walk through, and you can try this out yourselves too. With that, I'd like to thank all of you for listening to us this afternoon, spending your first day of your reInvent with us, to our guest speakers, Michael and Steve, for taking us along with their journeys as well. I've got all of our contact information up there, so when you get home at the end of this week or next week, you can contact us. Please do us a favor, fill out the survey in the session app if you don't mind. And we did save time for Q&A, but I think since it's a silent one, we'll just conclude it here, and you can come find us after. We'll help answer some questions for you. Thank you.